Here in the briefing room, we aim to bring you news and commentary without political bias. It's all about the analysis. We give you the facts, and then we talk about what those facts mean. Even before we begin, I want to thank you for being here. It is literally only because of you that we can make a go of this. So please do me the personal favor of liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, and sharing the podcast with your friends and family. It would really mean a lot. So what's in the news today? Actually, there's a lot in the news today. Our first topic is and should be the Iran war. Fighting has resumed again. The U.S. and Iran are trading strikes, serious strikes that are killing people. The United States is bombing military targets all around Iran. The Iranians are bombing U.S. military targets, so far primarily in Qatar and Kuwait. They're also hitting Bahrain and Oman. They fired missiles at Jordan yesterday. Those missiles did not impact anything. But this is a big deal. It's not just a temporary conflagration. This is a real war. This all started because, well, it didn't start. It all reignited because the Iranians attacked a Cypriot-flagged ship in the Strait of Hormuz. They hit the engine room, apparently with a drone. One seaman went overboard and is still missing and now presumed dead. At the same time that this is all happening, Washington lost one of its most influential foreign policy players over the last 3 decades. That was Senator Lindsey Graham. I have been tough on Lindsey Graham over the years. I have always maintained that on Capitol Hill, there are workhorses and there are show horses. A workhorse is a member of the House or a member of the Senate who actually writes legislation and is a substantive expert on something. A show horse is a member of Congress who just runs in front of the nearest camera and bloviates about whatever happens to be in the news. That was Lindsey Graham. I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but Lindsey Graham has so much blood on his hands over the last 30 years that I don't think we should be celebrating him. Lindsey Graham died on Saturday night at his home on Capitol Hill, just hours after returning from a trip to Kiev. He is one of the strongest supporters of the Ukrainian government on Capitol Hill. Medical examiners say that the cause was a perforated aorta. He apparently had arteriosclerosis that he didn't know about. His arteries were clogged. And the bottom line is that he had a massive heart attack. To understand how sudden this was, just hours before he died, Graham was speaking with President Trump and preparing to appear on NBC's Meet the Press the following morning, Sunday morning. He was booked, and then suddenly he was dead. In the end, Trump went on Meet the Press in his place. Graham was not just simply one of the Senate's loudest hawks. He was one of the few lawmakers with direct personal access to President Trump and to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. That made him a player in foreign policy automatically. He often served as an unofficial back channel between Washington and Jerusalem. But Graham was so pro-Israel as to be irrational. His death now sort of changes things on Capitol Hill for a number of reasons. Number one, Israel has lost its most vocal supporter. He really was its most vocal supporter. Number two, Ukraine has lost its most vocal supporter. Number three, the Republican Party has lost really what amounted to a Trump whisperer, somebody who had Donald Trump's ear and who could convince him to do things. But let's look for a minute at the history of Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham was in the House of Representatives for many years before being elected to the Senate 3 terms ago, 18 years ago. He was one of the leaders of the House impeachment of President Bill Clinton, made a name for himself there, ran for the Senate, got elected to the Senate, and has been easily reelected ever since. Now, he fended off a rather strong primary challenge a couple of months ago, but still with well over 50%. And he was a shoo-in for reelection in November. But Lindsey Graham was a chameleon. This is a word that I've used to describe him multiple times over the years. Whatever happened to be in vogue, whatever foreign policy goal happened to be popular, there was Lindsey Graham. If there was one thing that Lindsey Graham loved more than anything else, it was war. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Judge Advocate General's office in the Army. He served for decades, but he never saw a war that he didn't want to jump into with both feet. And I'm talking about Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Ukraine, Gaza. He loved them all. And he was one of the biggest proponents of a wildly inflated defense budget on Capitol Hill. The current defense budget is $1 trillion. That's more than the next 9 largest countries combined. And he wanted to increase that by 50% next year, in 1 year. He didn't care if children were starving. He didn't care that his state was near the bottom of the entire collection of 50 states in public education. He didn't care. So long as we had state-of-the-art weapons and weapon systems, ships, F-35 fighter jets, whatever the Pentagon wanted, Lindsey Graham made sure the Pentagon had. Lindsey Graham was also the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee and the number 2 on both the Appropriations Committee and the Judiciary Committee. And so he played a leading role in pushing Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominees through the process. Getting back to Israel here. For Israel, Lindsey Graham's death removes one of Benjamin Netanyahu's closest and most reliable allies in Congress. In both of these conflicts, whether it's Gaza or Iran that we're talking about, and going all the way back to the Iraq War, he was always more than happy for the conflict to escalate. And frequently, he was a proponent on Capitol Hill, sometimes the only proponent for sending in ground troops. His death, though, is an enormous potential gift for the people of Gaza. This is someone who, in the Meet the Press green room, would be on the phone with Benjamin Netanyahu asking if there was any information that he could reveal on the air. Seriously, this is what he did. Here's an example of how he would talk on that show.
So when we were faced with destruction as a nation after Pearl Harbor, fighting the Germans and the Japanese, we decided to end the war by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons. That was the right decision. Give Israel the bombs they need to end the war they can't afford to lose and work with them to minimize casualties. Well, can I say this? Why is it okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their existential threat war? Why was it okay for us to do that? I thought it was okay. To Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state.
Where do you even start with something like that? First of all, historians are unanimous now that it was not necessary for the United States to drop nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war was essentially over. Yes, we would have had to have launched a ground war, but the Japanese were broken. Besides, the Soviets were moving in from the north. The war was done. Dropping nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a political decision. And it was a terrible one. More than 100,000 people were vaporized by those bombs, not to even mention the thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people who developed cancers later from the nuclear fallout. But Lindsey Graham is advocating allowing Israel to use nuclear bombs on its own people, on innocent civilians, women, children, the elderly, populated areas. I don't know anybody in his right mind that would advocate for something like that. And furthermore, let's take it the next step. If it's okay for the United States to use nuclear weapons and okay for Israel to use nuclear weapons, then why wouldn't it be okay for the Russians to use nuclear weapons? Or the Chinese, or the Indians and the Pakistanis? The French, for that matter, the British? It would usher in an entire new world. It's insanity. This is an insane position perpetrated by Lindsey Graham. And here's how Benjamin Netanyahu reacted to news of Lindsey Graham's death. Let's go to that video.